And when up in the upper right-hand corner, you see Second Life. A lot of people will literally spend 4, 5, and 6 hours a day in Second Life. And it is a virtual world. It's not really a game, but you can play games in it. You literally live there. People have houses, they own property. There was a Japanese lady, in fact, who made over $1 million in real money by investing in virtual land. Think about that for a while. So, how do I teach geographers in Second Life? We have to know a little bit about the kinds of learning styles that we have to work with. There are assimilators, convergers, accommodators, and divergers. And I would draw your attention to the third one, the accommodators. These are people who tend to like experiential learning or hands-on learning. And it turns out when you do the research on this, that the accommodators do like to do the kinds of things that I've seen most geographers do. They set objectives, they have schedules, they don't mind doing trial and error things and what have you. So they tend to be more concrete and more active than some other learners. And if you look at the research on Kolb's experiential learning theory, you find out that geography fits really nicely inside that group of accommodators. So taking a hold of that little theory, I jumped in and I said, well, how does one add experiential content online? And the process goes through, it's a circular process. This is called learning by doing. And you see the diagram on the left. I'll make an expanded version of that right now. Okay. You start with an abstract conceptualization. You do active experimentation, have concrete experience, and then you reflect on what you've learned. So I began this process by prepping my students. The thing about Second Life is it has a whole set of tools to build things. And so I had, these are actually some of my students. They actually look like that in real life too, just, just so you know. So these students were actually there, and I had these, I'm sitting there with the green chair, the green box, and it's demonstrating how to actually create things, how you res a box in front of you and convert it and whatever. So you can basically create all sorts of tools. In fact, the tools that you see beside me in my little virtual self there, those were created by me as well. And so we began, after teaching them how to use the tools, I began with immediate application. And I created, through this NSF grant, I actually created 10 laboratory exercises as boxes. And if you click on the box, you can actually open it up and pieces come out. You have various types of things. You have text documents, you can have tools, you can have objects that have been created, sounds and visuals and all kinds of different things. You can even have a t-shirt with in New Mexico State on it, which I actually created in here as well. And so I took the students through a series of exercises. This one, if you notice the diagram in the back right-hand side, it's a diagram I use showing the shortest path algorithm through a surface. And what I asked the students to do was to actually use their skills in creating boxes and putting them together to try to recreate that diagram, so they can get an abstract version of how water would flow down a surface, for example. And for the GIS geeks in the crowd, you might be able to notice here, and I used, again, the tools. This was one of my students creating tools that demonstrated what we call undershoots or overshoots when you're digitizing as three-dimensional models. So the one on the left is an undershoot. That's a digitizing thing that should have gone in and touched that piece there. And on the right-hand side, it went too far. I also had another concrete experience here for the students where they had to take the map that's laying down on the colored surface on the bottom there. The map has all kinds of different categories on it. And then there's a grid. They had to lay the grid on this thing and then actually codify it so that I could actually figure out what the various types of surfaces were, what the categories were, whatever. This is a coding scheme for raster GIS. And then reflective observation. One of the things that the students really enjoyed was when I had them create cylinders, cones, reference globes, Mercator projections or flat screens, and planar projections, all using three-dimensional objects. One of my students, you may remember her, Anna Patterson, liked to jump inside the cylindrical projection there and say that she was really into projections. Sorry, it was her joke, not mine. And so when we went through all of this, the impacts on learning, one of the things, this is also Anna Patterson in the virtual sense. And Anna was actually, she and I were interviewed by NPR. And one of the things that the person asked was, why did you like Second Life? And she said, well, I'm a tactile learner. I learn by grabbing objects and touching objects and doing things with them. And she said, this is the type of environment that I'm really comfortable with. Some of the students were comfortable with it, some of them were not. One of the things that you should find out about this, though, is that it's continuing. It's not gone away. Right now, the Harvard Med School is actually using Second Life and similar environments to recreate surgical operating rooms, actually operating on virtual people. So this kind of thing seemed to be a natural for me. I will tell you that some of the students really got into it. Anna Patterson was one of them. Some of them did not. One of the issues that I had with this particular type of environment is that it takes a long time to learn some of the tools of Second Life. So it wasn't exactly 100% effective. It was an experiment. If I were to do it again, I would probably have to spend a lot more time teaching people the basics before I went on. A second avenue of research that I've been involved with is structural gamification. This also is called quest-based learning. When you think about gamification, we have all been gamified. We may not know it. But when you come on campus, when you drive into campus, there are many of these little signs that have your speed limit or your speed that flash on the screen. And all of a sudden you start seeing that thing flashing really fast because you're doing 35 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour zone. And unless you're one of those that doesn't pay any attention to these at all, what do? You slow down. But you want to get right as close to 25 miles an hour as you can without going over. So what's happening is you're being gamified. The game is being played in your head. You do the same thing when you get credit cards and you say, oh, you get bonus awards if you do this. You get bonus awards if you do that. So I investigated this whole idea of quest-based learning. And why do we do it? Several reasons. One is quest-based learning provides something that most courses do not. In the educational literature, you might hear the term, there's a term called, now I can't remember all of a sudden, where you do individual learning for individual people. And perhaps somebody can think of what the term is while I'm sitting here muttering. But the idea is that each individual gets a chance to learn things that they want to learn. So you have choice. So I've got this little kid here who can go to the left and go to the right. And one of the things about quest-based learning is you can't do everything. You can't just choose to do something that's way out of your league, but you can do it if you decide to do some of the prerequisite exercises. And in this course that I created, I had 192 exercises. Think about that, 192 quests. So you had choices that you could take to decide what you wanted to do. And that is something that the learners really thought was going to be a great idea. Another thing that they found very interesting, this mouse is trying to do something that's probably not really smart. And if he grabs the cheese, what's going to happen to the mouse? He's going to get whacked, all right? That's what happens when people take courses normally. They get whacked when they get something wrong. Everybody tells you you learn by making mistakes, right? Everybody's heard that. Everybody. But then what do? We punish you for being wrong. Well, I took this test, I got a 90%. Well, you just lost 10 points. In the quest-based learning, we don't punish you for being wrong. We reward you for being wrong and trying. There's several things going on here. You have the typical leveling up type of thing. So on the upper left-hand side here, you see the leveling up. We start with novice rank. And so they have these, they actually get these things as icons on their course. And if you once make it to Chief Operations Officer, which is the one with the 5 stars, that gives you 4,500 points. If you had 4,500 points, you have an A in the class. That's the highest grade you can get in the class. But it turns out you can keep questing afterwards. And I'll show you what that's all about. You also have rewards. So if you happen to be one, and I had several of these, who would turn in assignments at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they would ask me what I was doing when I turned them back to them at 3:15, having graded them. They said, "What are you doing up at 3:15?" I said, "I'm watching you at 3 o'clock. That's what I'm doing up." We had an award for excellence, an oil can award for somebody who keeps trying, doing an exercise over and over and over again, and until they get it right. We had fast workers. We had a whole bunch of different assigned rewards for people, including one for applied geography, which I always liked. We had a series of badges, including skills that are listed in the Department of Labor's skill set for GIS people: writing excellence, collaboration, communications, critical thinking skills. And these badges, there's a whole series of these badges that are given out, and each badge is associated with more points. And so you can get a reward that is not necessarily explicitly tied to the subject matter, but tied to the utility of the subject matter in that when you go out into the workplace, you can know about GIS, but you still have to be able to think critically. You have to be able to solve problems. You have to be able to work collaboratively. And all of these are part of the US Department of Labor's geospatial expertise model. Now, the diagram on the left is really important. And this goes back to our little mouse example. You'll notice there's 2 kinds of grading. There's subtractive and there's additive. The subtractive grading is the typical kind of grading that you get in normal courses. You start out with an A and work your way down to an F. And it's not exactly something that we want to encourage people to do. But that's typically what happens. And unless you're adding extra credit, which I know a lot of faculty do, you still have that negative implication. Everybody does something, gets something wrong, or they make a wrong guess, they're going to lose points. With the additive grading method, you start out with 0. You have no points at all. And so every time you do something, you're going to add points. Okay. And so if you're 5,000 point were an A, actually in my case, it was 4,500. Then once you just keep going, you collect points until you get that many, you've got an A. Now, here's the cool thing about this. If you do an assignment, every assignment is looked at in detail. And if you get less than 85% on that assignment, you don't get an 85, you don't get a 79, you don't get a 60. The assignment is given back to you with lots of feedback about what you did wrong and what you did right. Here's the cool things of what you did. Here's the bad things of what you did. And then you get a chance to do it again. And when they come back with feedback, in most cases, the second time around, they got at least 85% on that exercise. The cool thing is, it's not an exercise, it's a quest. If you've ever played a quest-based game, if you win the quest, you get all the gold. Here, you get all the points and more information. So you get more feedback. Even if you get an 85 or an 86 or a 90%, you still get feedback showing you what you could have done to get 100%. That's your win. Okay, you get all the gold. Now, this experiment in quest-based learning had been tested in elementary kids a long time ago, about 15 years ago, I believe, and the results were rather spectacular. Kids were actually reading, they were actually learning how to play games and then having to go out and read blogs that were at a level that were 2 and 3 grades higher than them because they had to learn this stuff in order to play games. And this technique was very useful in terms of teaching elementary school kids how to learn. So it was implemented by elementary school kids. The literature indicated it was working. It also indicated that even after the kids achieved an A, that's that line that says 2,000 experience points. You win, you get an A. But you'll notice that the curve keeps going up. There was a student in this particular case that got 2,780 experience points. Why? Because they enjoyed the game. There was something about the game that just keep getting them more and more interested. And so this is the whole point of gamifying a course. So how did I implement it? First thing you do is you create a diagram of your course. You're not expected to know all of this, but I divided everything up into level zeros, 1, 2, 3, and 4, various kinds of assignments, everything from how to turn in an assignment. I actually had a quest for how to turn in an assignment, the course mechanics quest, course tools quest, and then it starts going into the core, and it starts looking at all the various aspects of my traditional GIS course that I implemented this way. The tool that I used is a thing called the 3D Game Lab. The good news is this was a marvelous tool for doing this because it was designed specifically for you to keep turning back the exercise, and it kept track of all the times that had been turned in, and it kept track of all the experience points and all the awards and all of the things that you gathered, all the points that you gathered, and it kept track of all of this stuff. The bad news is the software went away. They had some issues with it legally. There were a couple of things in there that were exposing students to things that we shouldn't be talking about. But the big problem was they ran out of money. And I'll talk to you about it later, but we're hoping to help them get back in business. All right, so how do we do this? What you do is you create quests. This is a tool for creating the quest. And so this is a quest. It says the quest in support of Chapter 4, Learning Objective 7. Specifically, this supports the explanation of intersecting activity spaces and intersection overlay. And so I actually created this quest. It has 200 experience points. Eventually, I put in the approximate average time because the students, as they start doing this thing, they will show you how much time it takes to do one of these exercises. I had an estimated number of amount of time for that. Here's another one here. It actually shows the thing, and it shows you expiration dates I didn't put in because I didn't give expiration dates. You could do this stuff all semester long. It didn't matter. But it actually describes the quest itself, how to turn it in, and everything else. This is the tool that was built inside the 3D Game Lab. Okay, and here's a completed assignment. It even shows the submission details. So you notice the assignments are the same as any other assignment. The difference is how they're managed, in that if you get the assignment wrong, it goes back to you with more information. It may say, well, you might want to try reading this section again, or you might want to look at this, or think about this article that you should have read. And this way, the student is constantly getting feedback for everything that they do. And I will mention here at one point, I was talking to a friend of mine who said that nobody else is ever going to do this in college. And I said, why? And he said, how much time do you spend grading? And I said, about 20 hours a week on this class alone. He said, yeah, there's your issue. I was willing to do that. And I did enjoy it. I really did, because I thought that the students were really having a good time with it. Here's some of the various quests that I created. And you can see each one has a little symbol, and it's got whether or not it's in progress or completed. So each student will see this kind of board as well, so they know what they're doing. And this shows you some of the quests for the Fundamentals of GIS class. We had intro to the course quests. We had lecture quests, which involved reading and hearing the lectures and regurgitating it back in their own words. We had lab quests. We had portfolio quests, so that when they were done with the course, they could show employers what they had created. There were ArcGIS quests. These were quests that gave you Esri certificates for doing these things. And you'll notice each one has experience points, prerequisites, whether or not it's a solo exercise or if you have to do it in a group, whether or not it requires approval, that means by the instructor. Some of these things, if you do them, it's automatically graded and sent back, and they're ready to go for the next exercise. We had quizzes. We had personal project quests, group project quests, literature review quests, and we even had a quest hacker quest. Once you figured this thing out, there was a tool that allowed you to create your own quest. If you created your own quest, you got points for creating the quest. Then if you did the quest, you got more points. And anybody else could then do the quest that you created, because I would plug it into the class. We also had practicum quests, which was sort of a, here's a problem, you solve it type of thing. The achievements, of course, go from novice, the beginning, all the way up to chief operations officer. And here we have the associated point totals. So the novice was between 500 and 999 points. So you didn't even get a classification until you hit 500 points. And then all the way up to 4,500 plus. The awards included the Late Nighter Award, Award of Excellence, Oil Can Award, Fast Worker, GI Scientist, lab levels 1, 2, and 3. So as you went through different levels of labs and lectures, you got bonus points for moving up from one level to the next. So there's always an incentive to keep moving forward. We also had some bonuses and some, you notice the one with the Easter eggs. Those things are there, they're hidden. And so if you get to exam 2 and you complete exam 2, you get all 200 points for the exam, but there's an Easter egg there, and all of a sudden you get another 20 or 30 points just for finishing that exam. So again, more incentives to keep going on in the course. All righty, we had badges for various things. Now, the interesting thing about the badges is they're not random. The badges are tied explicitly to this thing, which is, can anyone tell me what this is? Anyone know? Nobody wants to guess? This is the US Department of Labor's geospatial experience model. It literally shows you the kinds of things that you should be doing in GIS. So if you look at this badge in the upper right-hand corner, it's tied to positioning and data acquisition. And there's another one that shows kind of a building block thing. It says analysis and modeling, software and application development, core geospatial abilities and knowledge. So I gave it Earth. Here's another one. We had teamwork, creative thinking, planning and organization, problem solving, working with tools and technology, checking, examining, and recording, business fundamentals. And another one, reading, writing, mathematics. Yes, these are tools that geographers need. Geography, of course, science and engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole thing is tied explicitly to this geospatial skills model. Interpersonal skills. Do you get along with your fellow students? Integrity, professionalism, initiative, dependability and reliability, and lifelong learning. Those who kept going after the course was, after they got to 4,500 points, for example, would get the learner button, the lifelong learner button. All of these, again, associated with more points. So what were the results? Well, generally, we had 44 students enrolled in the class. We had one unenrolled early on. They were group wins. Their quests completed, 2,377 quests completed. 346 awards were given, 244 achievements earned, 15 badges, average quest time 65 minutes, and ranks per grade were 12. So take a look at this. This is some of the top scores in the class. Now I would like you to look at Planetella. That was her name. She chose the name. And you notice I did not give their last names here. What was the top grade for an A? 4,500 points. What did she get? 5,940 points. She completed 111 quests out of 192. And if she'd had more time, she would have kept going. I actually kept this portion of the course going for 2 semesters, while the rest of the course only went for 1. So here's Panatella, and you can see where she's got all of her achievements, her professionalism badge, her dependability badge, and it shows all of the quests that she's done, so she can keep track of her grades all the time. Another thing that we are required to do if you do follow the QM rubric. And this was the final set of grades. And you can see that there were a huge number that got Chief Operations Officer. And that means that these were students that got an A grade. The blue are B and the green are C grades. If you look at the rest of them, there was a number of students that looked like they've all failed. But in fact, they didn't. What happened was most of these students dropped the course. They couldn't keep up. Interestingly enough, I looked at it, I said, boy, that looks terrible. But it turns out that the drop rate was actually pretty similar to the normal drop rate of my regular course in the course of a semester. So I wasn't as disappointed. Graphically, it looked pretty terrible. But then when I looked at it later and checked against my previous year's courses, there was no major difference. And they rated every assignment. And on the right-hand side is the number of people that actually rated things. One of the things that's really kind of interesting is that the students did a lot of art quests because they wanted to go after those certificates. Now, I warned them early on that the art quests were notoriously long in time and low in point values because I didn't want them spending a lot of time just learning ArcGIS. Interestingly enough, they didn't find them all that exciting. I mean, they were down to 4.66 as their rating, which is fairly low. But they still did a lot of these things. And I think they wanted those certificates as well as the badges and other micro credentials that they could use. So, conclusions. This is what I learned, is that the students look at this thing and say, I must learn ArcGIS. I must learn ArcGIS. I must learn ArcGIS. And I kept telling them, don't learn ArcGIS, because by the time you learn it, you'll have to learn it again because it changes. Learn the concepts, use it to learn the concepts. But artificial intelligence, that's the third area that I studied. And here's one of the problems we have with online classes. There's a lot going on. We have to give feedback. We have a lot of learners. We've got rubrics to worry about. And we're constantly having to do all kinds of grading and checking things and what have you. Have you ever thought about having a class, and I know all of you now have, where you have too many students to really give proper feedback? It's frustrating when you're an educator and you really care about giving feedback. This is something that's really disturbing, especially in an online environment. And it's hard. And at one point, I had a course with 90 students in it online. It's really hard to do a lot of grading, okay? In this particular case, I was teaching world regional geography and I had roughly 50 students. So it turns out the tool that I was using which is in addition to the LMS that we use, Canvas, uses artificial intelligence. And it breaks it into three parts. There's a moderation part where it actually watches what the students are doing and what they're writing. It's based a lot on text. And it also looks at closed-endedness. In other words, how are their sentences structured? The reason I ask this is because the questions in this particular course are asked by the students, not by me. I give them a scenario. They are to write a question and then respond to other students' questions. So they own the questions themselves. They decide what they are learning in this course to some degree. But sometimes you'll get somebody who will say, what color is, Ireland's flag? Well, that's a real simple color thing. They can look it up. It's not really a discussion question. And so it's closed-ended. It's not really the kind of question you're supposed to be asking. And again, remember, the students are asking the questions. There's also computer-assisted human moderation. It sounds redundant or counterintuitive, actually, because what's happening is the human is intervening, but also so is the computer. All right, so what this system does, it's called Packback. And I did use it during the semester. It costs $10 for the student for the semester. And it basically takes place within the essay question type of environment. And what curiosity score is it actually measures the presence of a question, description, or response summary. And it actually uses artificial intelligence to determine how much of an open-ended question it is. It also looks at word count. Presence of cited resources or sources, formatting and inclusion of resources, and behavioral data. This is all done as part of the artificial intelligence engine of Packback. It also has a community health algorithm built in. So it looks at things like it says, is the post close-ended? If it's close-ended, it's going to jump at you. It's going to yell at you. And I'll show you some of that in a moment. Post contains profanity or harmful language. It picks up on that. It finds the nastiness. Post displays low effort or lack of detail. So this is some of the stuff that the instructor would normally do. So let's take a look at this diagram. This is going to have a tiny bit of action. So keep your eyes peeled. This is student interactions with the artificial intelligence of this system of Packback. First, the student writes, our students get real-time feedback while typing to help them proactively improve their writing. Think about that. While they are writing their response, the computer is talking to them saying, are you sure you want to do that? He wanted an open-ended question. This doesn't look like an open-ended question. It literally is doing this in real time as the students are writing. It's helping them get a better score. And it's helping them to think about these kinds of things. They then submit the post, and then it comes back and it says, okay, I'm looking for closed-ended questions. I'm looking for plagiarism. I'm looking for insufficient length, class logistics content. Is it, responding to your actual question? Again, profanity or abuse. The thing moderates it, sends it back to the student, and coaches them. The student receives a coaching email with feedback about why their post was moderated. It sends it back to them and says, let's fix this thing. You want a better score on this. You want a better grade on this thing. Wouldn't you love to be able to do that if you had 50 students? I couldn't do it. This thing does. It helps you out. Then it says revise. The student is prompted to improve and republish the post, allowing them to apply and learn from the feedback. But the professor is also not out of this loop. The AI suggests top posts weekly for instructors to review and feature. So the AI says, here's some curiosity scores, some activities, flagging history, sentence depth, things that the instructor can say, I can focus on these and say, hey, this is good stuff. Try to duplicate that. They review and select 3 to 4 posts to feature per week. No time to review, no worries. The artificial intelligence will auto feature the top 4 posts if you don't have time to review and make selections. Let's say you got a bad week or you're off at the AAG meeting, virtually or otherwise. This thing will help you out. And then the instructors add praise to each featured post to explain why it's a good post. Students then receive the Curious Reader Digest weekly containing featured posts. That's again one of these things. It's almost gamification as well. So you get an instructor insights post every so often, once a week. Tells you about participation. And you can see here we had 97% participation, but last week it was 95%. So something spurred them on. Okay. Here we got 58% average curiosity score. Last week it was 98. Something went wrong. Was there something about the content that wasn't very interesting? Is there something I can do to fix it up? Is this something that is a problem for the course? And it also looks at the fastest improving students, so you can track them as well. All the time you're doing the course. It's really cool. It also looks at the top sources, this week's top sources, where they found their information. Okay. And so you get a full report like this. I'm not going to go through this in detail because it's basically just for demonstration purposes. But let's take a look at the 112 course and look at what we found out from this. Community stats, one that stood out. And this, the graph shows you the average curiosity score by week. You'll notice it falls off toward week 16 because we only have 15 weeks. And it still kept running for another week. But interestingly enough, the average curiosity score in this course, which is a freshman level, I'm bored as heck course, the average score for curiosity was 74.2. And Packback said that the average nationally is 50. So there was something about this course that they liked. And what I heard is that they liked the idea of owning their own questions, not having to answer my questions, but to ask their questions. One question I said was, you're the new ambassador to Afghanistan. And you ask your staff to tell them or to ask questions that you think need to be answered before you go there. And boy, some of the questions were wonderful. They were great. Community health. Your students sparked each other, their posts 548 times. That means that's liking. These are likes. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. So they're interacting with each other as well as interacting with you. 80% of all posts in the community cited a source. I really love that. And these are some of the sources. They cited the BBC, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, the New York Times. Think about this. These are freshman students. Okay. These are just a couple of the questions. If granted independence, would Bougainville prosper on its own? That was a student asking that question, not me. The questions were blowing my mind. I just loved it. The top post, how do Americans view their own democracy and the value of their country? Student generated questions that other students had to answer. What has made Venezuela unsafe for US ambassadors? Generally, the student reactions to this were excellent. They really did seem to like it. There was one student that objected, saying that this was the same as the discussion channel, except it cost him $10 a semester more. That was one student. The rest actually seemed to like it quite a bit. And again, when I talked to them informally, one of the things that they said they liked was that it gave them more control over their learning because I gave them a topic, but they asked the questions. So the conclusions for this, the good. Curiosity scores, community health, lots of likes, lots of sparks. Good curiosity, post quality was really good. Student interactions, really good. The bad. There was some problem with student navigation at first, especially. Later on, they figured that out. That's typically the same problem for LMS. Some students, especially the one, objected to paying for the discussion tool. And then a lack of integration with the LMS, which I believe PackBack has solved already. So those are the three things that I have done research on and that I wish to talk about. But since I am retiring, I thought I would take just a moment to let you know where I'm going next. And I am a co-founder of a group called the International Advisory Board for Online Learning. We have now, as I talked to my friend, we have actually 117 board members already after about 4 weeks of recruiting. These are people who are desperately trying to get online education help to people who are uncomfortable with it. It is going to be a nonprofit organization. It is meant to be global. And we also have two companies, Cengage, which some of you may already know about, and K16 Solutions have offered money to support our efforts. So that's where we're going next. And to finish, I wanted to make sure I finished in 45 minutes or less. One last slide, and that is to say farewell and thank you to my fellow faculty. Questions?
Thank you very much, Mike, for that excellent presentation. Kind of humbles me. I thought I was a pretty good teacher, but guess I better up my game a little bit. So we now have an opportunity for some questions. I believe the proper protocol we've used is for people to type them into the chat. Alternately, if I can keep all these balls in the air, I can let people put up their hand in their participants panel and let you speak, whichever you'd like. So I've got the participants panel wired, the shelter dog is behaving herself, and I'm paying attention. So either way, we can look for questions in the chat, excuse me, or we can have folks put up their hand, whichever they'd like to do.
How do you address potential issues with home students, some students not receiving enough likes? That's a really good question. And what I did was I actually intervened and asked them why they thought they weren't getting likes. And interestingly enough, most of them figured out that they probably weren't putting in the effort that they thought. Is this you, Bo? I love the smile. Thank you. That's a great question. It really is. But they, it's one of these things where you start talking to them about what they've done and you get the old, oh, yeah, I really didn't spend a lot of time on it. And that's usually what it was. And so I said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do you a deal. I'm going to give you a chance to get your likes up. I said, I want you to pay real close attention to this. And I actually gave some additional feedback on the next upcoming topic. It's very similar to what I did when I was teaching junior high school. Actually, I was teaching freshman science, and there was a student that was really well liked, but kept getting harassed by her father because she wasn't doing well enough in class. So I made her my lab assistant, and she went from a C student to a B student in about 6 weeks. Thank you so much for the question, Bo. I appreciate it.
Other questions for Dr. DeMers?
Yes, I have a glass of wine scheduled for my next hour.
I've got mine hidden off to the side. As long as the dog doesn't bark, no one will see.
It's really kind of cool. I got the two Chris's right next to each other now.
So I'm not seeing any hands going up in the participants panel or questions. I'll just fire one off as the.
Oh, wait a minute. We got two hands over here. We got, which one went up first, Dan or Brad?
Hey, I'm still typing.
You're still typing.
Okay, Brad Hansen, please join us for your question.
Sweet. Thanks for your presentation, Dr. DeMers. Thanks, Chris, for seeing me and for everyone helping me be seen. I think it's really cool that you're using Kolb's experiential learning cycle. I've read some stuff from him, and I think they're just organizational and experiential education kind of ties with outward bound experiences.
Yep.
I'm just really curious, since this is all online and something that I've been working with myself. I'm curious how you define concrete experience.
Well, it is interesting that you asked that. I thought about that myself, even just putting this thing together. Normally, we think about something we can actually physically feel. But let me give you a very quick story. I had a friend, student of mine, who went through my course and then decided to pursue Second Life as just a hobby. And I was doing a workshop and I needed somebody to help me do some things in Second Life. And she said, "Can you pay me?" And I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pay you in Linden dollars." And I'm talking to the student in a regular classroom just before class began. And one person was listening to us like, "What are they talking about?" And I said, "Well, what do you need the money for?" And she said, "I need to buy a house." He goes like this, "What do you do? You're talking about a house in a virtual world, right?" And she said, "Yeah." He says, "What do you need a house for?" And she says, "Well, my computer is slow, and when my avatar reses, I res before my clothes do. And so I'm naked." He said, "It's an avatar. It's a cartoon." And she says, "It is not. It's me." And there's where it gets into you. When you start dealing with these virtual worlds, it does things to your brain, and you start identifying not only with the objects there, but with yourself. Just so you know, my avatar is 6'7", 40 years old. He's never going to get any older. But the thing is that people actually start, because you manipulate the tools, you're actually physically, structurally using the tools to create stuff. It starts to feel very much like it's real, like it's a real experience. That make any sense?
No.
Probably not. No, you really have to experience. And just between you and me and the fence post, if you're ever interested, I'll drag you into Second Life and get you an avatar, and you'll find out what happens. Because it turns out one of the secondary education faculty members' avatar fell in love with my avatar. Yeah, no figure. Does that help at all?
You definitely answered the question, but yeah, I have a million questions, but I know other people got them too. Thank you.
Send them to me. Seriously. I'll be glad to answer them. Or we've got a
question from Dr. Dugas.
We do. I'm going to read it right now.
Feel free to open your mic and ask it, or Mike can just read it.
Well, I'll read it. Okay. As you noted, that's me, some programs go away. Do you think an economy for AI collegiate learning will stabilize? Wow. Also, will geography generally be able to put its particular spin on this style of learning in terms of spatial learning? Wow. I like Dan. I really do. This is something I just have to say this in front of God and everybody. I've never seen anyone that can drill down into a problem faster than you can, Dan. I have always admired that about you. It just blows my mind. Stabilize, I don't know. I was actually trying to raise some money for this guy, but I don't have the capability of doing what I want. But they are dead set on recreating the
All right.
3D game lab.
Good.
So that's one thing. So okay. They're trying to recreate the 3D game lab. As far as the AI thing is concerned, Packback seems to be doing really well. They're getting, I followed them on Twitter, and every week there's a new person, a new department, and I'm a big salesman of theirs because I just love this tool. It allowed me to do things I couldn't do before. The second one, boy, I'll tell you, that's actually the topic of a research grant that I'm working on right now, a proposal. So yes, I'm not going away. I'm just going to be less of a hassle to everybody daily. We're actually looking at trying to define what geospatial expertise is. And if we can define it, we want to be able to find a way to acquire it quickly. So that our goal ultimately, believe it or not, is to have 18-year-old kids graduating from high school starting careers in GIS as experts. That's our whole bailiwick. And I'm working with a young lady from Texas A&M who's a cognitive psychologist and has a master's degree in GIS from Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara. So, and that isn't that kind of your backdoor as well, Chris? You're
Yeah.
San Diego State and
Yeah. So NMSU and UNM built this joint DOC program of which we're very proud. Chris Lippett, Caitlin Lippett, and I all came out of that program. So Doug Stowe says hi, Chris and Caitlin. We're at 1 minute after 4. We started a few minutes late. I welcome one more question.
And
got-
before the question, if I can just throw in real quick, for NMSU folks and or anyone from UNM that wants to join us, we have another Zoom room that's opening momentarily to celebrate Mike and to celebrate the NMSU Geography Award winners. I just put the link in chat and the password right there, so everyone should have it. So everyone is welcome to join that as well. If you're not zoomed out after this, and hope to see many of you there. Okay, sorry to interrupt the question, but I just wanted to
Thank
let you
you.
know
Rick.
before I
thank
drop
you all
off
for
to
being
open that
here.
room
I
up.
appreciate it.
This was my bad manners. I forgot.
Thanks, Mike, for the answer. The rest of the geography faculty, I think we should hire this guy.
Yeah. It appears that's what he said to me 20 years ago, but so I want to thank everyone for coming. This is a commitment. It is 4:02 on a Friday afternoon, 15 months into a pandemic, and I really appreciate everybody coming. I want to issue special thanks to Maria Lane and Chris Duval at UNM for being partners in this. I'm thrilled about this program. I'm thrilled about this colloquial series, and it will continue in the fall. With that, I wish everyone for a good weekend, be well, and special thanks to Mike for sharing his wonderful work with us. I'll leave the room open because once I leave, things fall apart. Everyone have a great day and thanks for coming.
God bless. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Chris, you'll probably get an email about the recording since I handed off hosting. So if you do that, let's just coordinate.
Okay, I've got some students that attended for extra credit, and I told them I would make the recording available.
Okay.
And then if you can send me that list of
Yep.
attendees, that'd be great. I cruised the list, but I was a little distracted listening to Mike. I suppose that's what we should be doing today. So I'm not sure I got it, but thanks, Maria. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate all your energy, and I'm looking forward to working with you next year.
Yeah, me too. All
Cool.
right. Have a good weekend, Chris.
Thank you, Maria.
See ya.
And thank everyone else on the call.
Yeah. Bye.
So Caitlin, I popped into the SDSU UCSD colloquium the other day, and I was visiting with the faculty member that was doing it, and I told her about our program, and she's like, "Oh, you must have worked with Dr. Stowe." And she spoke of him as if he was kind of like a legend. And I said, well, he is kind of like a legend. He's a great guy. So I thought you and Chris would find that of interest. Hey, Julian. I've got Ben, Marisa, Joanne, Caitlin, and Julian. Do you have anything that you want to share with me or the other people in the room before I shut things down?
I just want to say thank you for the meeting, Professor.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming. We really appreciate it. And